Hi, this is Allison and Megan, and then this is our end of quarter update for metacognitive behavior tracking. So, I guess to start with, the beginning of the quarter, this is our first time in GTR, and there's a lot of struggles. So the first a couple of weeks, like sprint 0 and sprint 1, we did some preliminary interviews with students, but the results that we got were kind of all over the place. They weren't really helpful.
And I think that was largely part because we didn't know how to interview students and phrase our questions in ways that would help us get the information that we needed. And we also, on top of it, that we didn't totally have an understanding of our project and how self-regulated learning and metacognition were correlated, which is a big part of our project. So that was really difficult as far as the design aspect of our project went.
The research part of our project, we also struggled a lot there because we didn't really know how to read papers. It was pretty time consuming, and then we weren't really remembering anything that we were reading, so we spent hours on reading papers. And then we also didn't know how to find relevant papers. We didn't know where to look for them and what kind of papers we were supposed to be reading to help us gain a more of an understanding of our project.
And then as far as the DTR process went, we didn't really know how to plan our sprints well and break down tasks, so we ended up with huge tasks on our sprint that were way too difficult to do and kind of deterred us from really finishing our sprints the way we wanted to. And also, the stories that we put in were way too big and vague, and we didn't know how to kind of break that down and make it into actionable items. And we also didn't understand how to translate that into clear deliverables.
Also, part of that, time management was a bit of a struggle. We would forget things because nothing really had strict deadlines, and all of a sudden it'd be a couple days before SIG, and then we tried to cram in our entire sprint, so that really wasn't working for us. And I guess going forward, the next couple of weeks, the middle of the quarter for sprints 2 and 3, we were still struggling.
We had our status update during sprint 3, but through the activity we did, we learned all the holes in our design arguments, and there were a lot of them. But we figured out what we were unclear about, and so this was a huge turning point in our project, and we'll talk more about that later. And through this, we also improved much better with our paper reading, and we began to choose papers that were relevant to our problem. So these were also huge breakthroughs that helped us later on. We also improved our interview questions and started writing user stories to help think of concrete scenarios, and that informed our later interview questions when we started interviewing users again.
So through working on our design arguments, writing the URG, which is a huge thing for us to kind of think about our project and get everything in order, and reading papers on designing metacognitive activities, we thought we understood what our project is. Okay, that's a lie because we didn't. We knew how self-regulated learning helps students learn better from reading papers and literature, and we knew that metacognition also helps students learn. But one of the problems is that we didn't know how metacognition was related to self-regulated learning, and we just could not wrap our heads around it.
And then these were reflected through the first few drafts of our URG. It was really unclear, really abstract, and the feedback we got was that nobody understood what we were trying to say and what we were trying to do. And our research question wasn't clear to both the people who are reading our URG and ourselves as well. So we were kind of running in circles with our research question, and we didn't understand how to clarify it.
So our huge breakthrough kind of came towards the end of the quarter, around sprint 4. So I think a lot of it was figuring out our project, or figuring out what the research question for our project was. So we know that our project goal seeks to help students achieve their full learning potential by increasing their metacognitive skills, and that we want to achieve this goal by having students track their learning behaviors and encouraging them to think about their processes. So from our status update, we learned that students often have difficulty self-tracking their study behaviors. So they either forget altogether or prioritize something else, and they don't ever go back to their original study plan. Something that was really interesting was that somebody said that because they planned too optimistically, they don't want to go back and track themselves failing, so they were scared, and then they would just not go back and not track their behavior. And we found out that one of our research questions is how we can actually use technology to make it easier for students to track their learning behaviors.
And from this research, we finally figured out the relation between metacognition and self-regulated learning. And this was a huge breakthrough that we got from reading one of our research papers, or it was a chapter out of a book called How Learning Works. And we also talked with Leisha and Mysore, and it was incredibly helpful. We actually read this twice. So we read this earlier in sprint, like I think 3, and we read it again in sprint 4 or 5. I don't remember which one. And it was this chapter of this book really like changed the way we thought about our project. And it talked about how there's a self-directed learning cycle that's very much linked with a metacognitive cycle. And so for every part of the self-regulated learning cycle, the metacognitive cycle asks if you're doing each step of your self-directed learning well. Here's we have a picture of this. Oh, it's over there. This one. All right, so I think it's in the screen.
Okay, yeah. So I guess like if you can see from here, the self-directed learning cycle has 5 parts: assessing the problem, evaluating the strengths and weaknesses, planning whatever it is that you need to plan, applying the strategies to your plan, and then reflecting on whether you did it well. So the 3 parts that we're really focusing on is the reflect part, the plan part, and the apply part. So basically how the metacognitive cycle works is that for example, if a student's going to plan their study strategies for the next week, they're going to first of all plan how they're going to plan. I know it sounds like super crazy. And then apply their plan to their plan, and then reflect on whether that plan is good. Now, it's, like, I know that this sounds like a bunch of like really crazy, like confusing things here, but essentially, for students to self-regulate their learning, it's going to help them like think about like the specific steps that they're doing, and the hopefully like by having students like get into the habit of planning, applying, reflecting, and going back to the cycle over and over again, we hope that we can build that sort of like metacognitive like thinking that comes from just, I guess, doing the actions.
So basically within each step of the self-directed learning cycle, there's another self-directed learning cycle within that, and that's where the meta aspect comes in, the metacognition, and that's how you develop that, is those like cycles within cycles. And I think that was the biggest breakthrough in our project when we realized that. It was huge, and it clarified so many things for us.
So the next question is, since we found through our status update that people don't like to track their behavior, how can we actually, make it easier for people to track their behavior?
And so the way we did that was we brainstormed a lot and thought about our technology. And we've talked a lot about, we decided on a mobile application because those are transportable. And we chose iOS because most people have iPhones. And we thought a lot about a flowchart paper prototype. And since people don't like to input manually their study plans because they're already super busy, we're currently looking into data scraped from current resources. So say they track in their Google Calendar when they go to the library, and when they study, or when they go to office hours, things like that, or they track it in a Trello board where they put all their assignments and what they need to do. And so we're gonna try to work off of those existing sources so that people don't have to input everything, and it's not another task that they have to do. That's more like homework. And then within that, we're gonna pick only one slice of this self-directed learning cycle and focus on a smaller piece in our tech, because it is such a huge challenge and such a big cycle that we want to focus on a smaller piece and break that down in our tech, since we only have so much time, and we want to really focus and get results. So for example, if you were going to the library, we're thinking about location tracking. So say you go to main library or mud library, the app will know that you're in one of these locations, so it can ping you and say, oh, are you in the library right now? And then from there, we can ask those reflective questions like, what type of studying did you do? How much time did you spend there? How productive do you think you were? And those will prompt the reflection. So this focus on the reflection kind of slice of that self-directed learning cycle. And it'll prompt these questions.
Okay, so going forward for next quarter, what we really want to do is investigate more scenarios and behaviors, like specific things that people either struggle with or like specific scenarios that like might occur that this, I guess like that's like specific parts, yeah, specific to parts of the self-directed learning cycle, and then specific instances in which students need to plan, apply, and reflect their learning strategies. Something else that we want to look into is like more need finding interviews that are specific to our technology. I guess just like features that we want to design. So like what would students like to see? What would help students in an app? Something like that.
We're also looking into this data scraping that will hopefully make it much easier to use and track and plan also. So we're testing to see where we can pull data from and what kinds of data we can get from pulling it, and see how that applies to metacognitive behavior tracking.
And last two things, we want to design the app interface, kind of like create some like paper or lo-fi prototypes, some potential brainstorm ideas for what the interface should look like, and of course continue to understand our research questions and our project goals better, more and more hopefully as we go on.
So yeah, I think we've made a ton of progress this quarter considering where we started, and we're really excited for next quarter.
Thank you.